Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am your host, Roel Dionisio. And today we're going to talk about capturing wireless frames with a Mac. So if you are like me and a lot of other people, you're using a MacBook Pro for your day-to-day job, but you also want to do some frame captures, for example. But before we get to that, part of the big news with this episode is we have redone the website. We gave it a new look. We wanted to clean it up a bit. And so if you head over to cleartosend.net, head over there with your browser, your web browser. You can use your laptop, you could use a tablet or your iPhone. It's a very responsive website. So from there, front and center, you'll see the latest episode and you'll get a short description of what that episode is. And from that page, you can actually just play the latest episode through the web browser. And if you want to, you could open that episode in a new window just so the audio doesn't get interrupted. Or you can actually download the audio straight to your computer if that's how you want to consume the content. And then if you scroll down on the website, you'll see all the latest episodes. There's a player there, a description of what the episode is, and some images that are attached to that episode. If you scroll down, we talk about your host, me, Roel Dionisio, and also Francois Verges. We have our descriptions up there. If you want to know a little bit more about us, you could subscribe to the podcast. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe via iTunes, for example. If you head over to cleartosend.net/iTunes, that'll bring you directly to that page. And you can also review us there as well. And we encourage you to review us. We want to know what you guys think about the podcast and also get that word out there to your friends and colleagues and anyone else you may know about what you think about the podcast here and how we're doing. That would be most appreciated. We do want to thank everybody who have subscribed to the podcast, and you guys are everywhere. You guys are worldwide. You're all over different countries, primarily in the US and in Canada, but we are across the pond there in Europe and different parts of the world. So that's incredible. And we always want to provide you with as much value as possible. And we hope we're doing that. And if you haven't, you could actually join our newsletter, subscribe to receive some info and the latest news, a lot of other content as well that we don't post on the website. And you could do that at the bottom of the website to join our newsletter. We don't spam. We do send some content regularly. And we hope you enjoy that. But same like the previous website, we still have a contact form. So if you do want to reach us in some way, you can reach us there at the contact form. That's cleartosend.net/contact. And if you want to ask a question that we could answer on the show or just a general question at all, there is an Ask a Question link at the top of the navigation there of the website. Now, if you click on Ask a Question, there's two ways you could submit a question. You could either record your own voice, which will record it as an MP3 format. Then it'll get sent to us, which we could play in our episodes here in a future episode. And then we answer your questions here on the show. If you prefer not to record your own voice, and I completely understand if you don't feel comfortable with your voice, because it did take me a long time to get comfortable doing this podcast. We do have a form where you can fill out your name and email and also the question, and then we'll answer it on the show that way. So that's cleartosend.net and then Ask a Question at the top there. So head out to the website. Let us know what you think. It's a brand new look and feel for us, and hopefully it's for the better. And if you have any suggestions or some feedback, let me know on Twitter. You can do @cleartosend. And hit us up there. So let's get into our main topic here, which is capturing wireless frames with a Mac. And maybe you might be asking, why would you want to capture frames on a Mac? And so I would actually respond with, why wouldn't you want to, because the Mac is fully capable of capturing frames over the air just with its built-in NIC card. You can do it via command line, although it might not be as simple and intuitive as some might think. There are other tools out there to help you um, create that process more easily, and that way you could or not record, but you could capture these frames instantly, save it to a specific location, and then keep it for further analysis in the future. So, a couple of reasons why you would want to capture frames is maybe you want to learn how Wi-Fi works. When I was first starting to do my CWMP certifications, I was actually using a MacBook Pro, and I've used a Windows machine as well, but I was using the MacBook Pro to capture different frames to see how an 802.11 association worked out, or maybe to figure out how security works. For example, what does the BPA2 look like over the air, or you wanted to see what kind of client capabilities were presented to an access point, for example, or from an access point, the access point can tell a client what its capabilities were. So you could see the beacons, for example. That's a legitimate way why you would want to capture frames is to really learn how Wi-Fi works and to see all these frames captured and seeing how the devices interact with each other. You really get a great understanding for why Wi-Fi is such a great technology. The protocol itself is very robust. Even when Wi-Fi is slow, it's still working, but you can see some of the reasons why it may be slow in a frame capture, or you may be able to see why it's really fast and why it's humming along. And you could see that within some captures. And so I did mention that I used to do frame captures for the CWMP exams, and that's very true. So if you're studying for the CWAP, for example, the AP analysis portion of that exam, the frame captures will be very beneficial for you because you really learn how to analyze Wi-Fi. Now, the previous certification for the CWAP really made you dive deep into the frames, and this time around it's not so much, but maybe that'll change in the future. But if you're even studying security, you wanted to study WP2 security and open security, what the difference is between those two and how that works. That's another great example. One of the primary reasons why I do frame captures is really just for troubleshooting, because you may have a problem and you've exhausted all the resources that you've done, right? You checked your infrastructure, you've checked the client, but you just can't nail down the issue. And so, as people will say in networking, is they'll say that packets don't lie. So in this case, with Wi-Fi, the frames don't lie. And so when you capture these frames as you're troubleshooting, you're going to really find out what the root cause of some issues are. And one of the examples most recently was I was at the Wi-Fi Now conference in Redwood City, which is just south of San Francisco. I was unable to get my laptop connected to Wi-Fi. It looked like I was associating, but nothing was working. Although my iPhone, which was connected to the same Wi-Fi, was able to transfer data just fine. I was able to go on Twitter, for example, but I could not get my laptop to really connect. And I wasn't sure what was wrong because I was associating. I was getting the splash page, or actually, I didn't get the splash page. But what I did was I used an application to start capturing frames on a specific channel, the channel that I was connected to, or trying to connect to on the SSID, and I was able to open the protocol analyzer and see the AP actually responding to clients saying that it could not take any more associations. So it looked like the access points in the area reached capacity because of the number of devices were there. And that was one example of how I was able to troubleshoot even a Wi-Fi network that's not mine. So that's an example of how you can dive in and see if you really understand Wi-Fi communications, you can try to pinpoint where some problems might be within that network. Another reason why you may want to do frame captures is you want to do some verification. You want to see what data rates frames are being sent out, and you might want to verify authentication. For example, if devices aren't able to authenticate properly, what might be the reason why? And you might also want to verify some capabilities, is another example. Can the client support the capabilities that the access point is providing for the SSID that it's trying to connect to, as an example? So when you're capturing frames, you don't just start capturing frames with your laptop. You actually got to think about where you're going to capture these frames from. And that really depends on where what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to troubleshoot an issue, you want to get close to wherever the source of the problem is. So if a laptop can't connect to Wi-Fi, you want to try capturing as close as you can to the laptop. Or if there's something, maybe a bigger issue going on, you may want to capture closer towards the AP that's problematic. And so once you nail that down, then you start using these tools. And so the tools that I use for capturing wireless frames with a Mac is one. You obviously need a Mac. That's the tool, the biggest tool I'm using here. Now you could use a Windows machine, but we're gonna stick with Mac because you could use the built-in wireless NIC there to capture frames for you. Now, the second tool that we need here is called AirTool, and I will send out some links in the show notes. So if you head over to cleartosend.net, and it's going to be slash 121. So this is episode 121. We will have a list of all the tools that I use to do wireless frame captures. So again, that's AirTool, which allows you to select what channel you want to capture on. So I may have my laptop connected to channel 60, for example, on 5 gigahertz. But if I want to capture frames on the 2.4 and maybe on channel 6, for example, I can select that. And then from there, just start capturing frames. Another setting that you could do here is you could actually select the channel width that you want to capture on. So if you're capturing on 5 gigahertz and maybe there's bonded channels, either 40 or 80 or maybe 160, if your device supports that, you'll be able to select that channel width and capture all the frames necessary there. Another cool thing with AirTool is you could set the default location of where all these captures are going to be stored. So as it's capturing frames, it's going to want to save those frames somewhere afterwards. So you can either set your desktop, your downloads folder, for example, or maybe you have a specific folder for that. You could limit how much the capture will capture. So how many files per capture, or how big that capture is going to be. Now, I wouldn't recommend setting that, but that is an option that you can do if you're maybe starving on space, for example. And then after you save that capture file in with AirTool, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to automatically open Wireshark? That's what I have mine set to. And some of the advanced features with AirTool is you can opt to not save any of the data frames. So do not save the layer 3 through 7 payload if that's not required, right? So if you don't need to see any of that, then why save it? So that's another reason to use AirTool. And then if you're getting fancy here and you use Cloud Shark or Mojo Packets, you could actually integrate those services into AirTool and it'll automatically upload it. So that's AirTool for the Mac. You can download that. I believe it's free, and I'll link to that in the show notes. Now, the next tool that's absolutely required if you're beginning to learn about capturing wireless frames is you're going to need Wireshark. And this is a free application. Just go to wireshark.org and you should be able to download the Mac version of Wireshark. But what's really key here And what makes it easier to go through all these wireless frames is to download the MetaGeek profile. And the MetaGeek profile will actually color the different types of frames. It makes it a lot easier to spot out specific frames if there's something that you're looking for, and it's a lot easier on the eyes. And I'll link to that also in the show notes. That's pretty easy to install, and I will have instructions on how to install that MetaGeek profile in Wireshark. Now, another handy tool here, which I believe you can sign up for a free account. It does have some limitations as far as the file size that you can upload, but that's Mojo Packets. And this tool here is a web application, and it was developed by Mojo Networks. And what you do is after you've captured your frames, it saves it into a PCAP file for Wireshark. You could upload these that Wireshark that PCAP file into Mojo Packets. That's mojopackets.com. And then you should be able to visualize some of the troubleshooting that you're doing. So it'll visualize those frames for you, and it'll actually tell you much faster than what you could do just by looking at the frames. It could tell you and identify some of these root causes of the problems that you're having. So if you're having DNS issues, it'll tell you that or if you're having association issues, it'll tell you some of those failures there if that's what you've captured, or maybe there's a high retry rate. So it's a way to visualize these frames that you've captured and actually identify some of the issues much faster. So that's another tool that I recommend. Now, some tools that are not required but can help, they are Wi-Fi Signal and Wi-Fi Explorer. If you're trying to figure out what what channel a specific network is on, then you may want to use some of these tools to scan the Wi-Fi and see which channel you really want to be operating on to determine some of these issues. Or maybe you're trying to just learn how Wi-Fi works. You want to see is there anyone on DFS channels, for example. So you could use Wi-Fi Explorer to do that. But it's not going to be absolutely required for this process of capturing wireless frames. What you really need is the Mac, AirTool, and Wireshark to really do what we're trying to do here now. And so what you're going to do first is you're going to install Wireshark. You're going to head over to wireshark.org. You're going to download that to your computer, install, and that should be fairly straightforward. And I just download the Mac OS, in this case, the 10.6 version. It is the stable release, and it's got all you really need to do frame captures. Now, the next important thing to do here is to download AirTool. And actually, before we download AirTool, we're going to download the Wireshark profile from MetaGeek. And we want to give a lot of credit here to Joel Crane, who was at the time working at MetaGeek. And these colorings come from their Windows product called IPA, the MetaGeek IPA, and it's an equivalent to Wireshark, and it helps visualize some of these frames for you and uses nice graphics to determine what percentage are data frames, for example. And so these colorings have allow different frames to stand out. So, for example, management frames are colored purple, control frames are orange, and data frames are blue. So you can easily track what exactly is going on in your frame capture. And so what I'll do is link out to the MetaGeek profile and then have those installation instructions, because what you're going to do is download the file. You got to unzip the contents of that file, and what you'll see is a folder called MetaGeek profile. Now that MetaGeek profile is then just going to be copied into the directory path of where Wireshark keeps the profiles. So then when you turn on Wireshark after copying the folder, on the bottom right of Wireshark, you're going to click on the lower right corner, and there will be a profile section. Once you click, you can actually select MetaGeek profile as a profile to use when you're using Wireshark. So the next tool to install is from Adrian Granados, called AirTool, and it's the most easiest way to capture frames with the max built-in adapter. This is really a no-brainer to use. It's wherever I'm at, I have AirTool running in my menu there, and I just use it to capture frames. And it's neat because once you start capturing, it'll tell you what it's capturing now. You won't be able to use your laptop's Wi-Fi adapter as it's trying to capture frames, but it tells you the status, how what time it started, and then how many frames it's actually captured, as long also with the size of that capture as well. And then when you stop the capture, it then reconnects back to the Wi-Fi you were connected. So it's a completely free tool. It was created with the support of the WLAN professionals community. A lot of people have provided their input into this application, and so we really want to thank Adrian Granados for doing this. So what I'll do is I'll link out to the site specifically, which has the download file, and from there you just install it, and you've got this menu bar icon at the top. And if you just want to capture the frame that you're currently on, all you got to do is hit that icon and just hit capture. And it'll start capturing on the channel that you are currently on and also what the channel width is. Now, the one thing that I like to do once I've captured the frames with Wireshark, I do have it set to automatically open Wireshark afterwards. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just take a quick look. But once I close it and I have the PCAP saved to my desktop, the default name that it's going to use is AirTool, and then it'll have the date and the time that the capture was created. What I like to do is add the channel in front of that name, so that way you know what channel you were capturing on, and then maybe add another name for more specific details. But what I like to do is actually rename some of these with the prefix, so I really know what kind of file it is. I do have a lot of Wireshark captures here, frame captures that I need to go off of. So when I'm doing a capture, I capture for at least 5 minutes if I'm trying to either analyze the current Wi-Fi network, or if I'm trying to troubleshoot an issue, you may want to run it a little bit longer. But you want to be aware of how large that file is going to be, because it's going to constantly capture. And if you have a busy Wi-Fi network, the more frames you're going to catch. And so one of the examples of me using this was I was at Wi-Fi Now. I was at a hotel, the Pullman Hotel in Redwood City. It's a nice fancy hotel. It's got one of those Diamond Star awards. And I was sitting in the kitchen area near the bar. And I didn't see any of the access points in the area, but I did notice using Wi-Fi Explorer that the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum was about 50% utilized. Now, this was really early in the morning. There wasn't a lot of people down there, but 2.4 was just completely garbage. So I took out AirTool, right? So and I just picked channel 11 as an example and started capturing for about 5 minutes. Within that 5 minutes, it opened. I opened Wireshark, and within that 5 minutes, I was able to filter down the capture to how many frames out of all the frames I collected were just beacons, for example. And shockingly, about 50% of the frames that I captured were beacon frames, and that's just a lot of the APs just telling you that there's an SSID out there and its capabilities and whatnot. And in the 2.4, there were a lot of APs broadcasting in the area I was sitting at, so it wasn't that surprising. But that was one way I was able to use AirTool and then look at all the beacon frames and kind of see all the SSIDs that are there and a percentage of what the beacon frames were compared to all the frames. And then the next thing I did was actually broke that down to how many retry frames was a percentage of all the frames that I captured. And that was also high. I think that was around 28%. And so that's how I was able to analyze the 2.4 gigahertz in a matter of 5 minutes of sitting there. Now, if you have a specific issue you're trying to resolve and you've captured all these frames, the next step is you can either sit there and figure out what kind of display filter you need to use to identify a potential problem. And that might take some time. And we did have an episode previously where we talked about display filters, and we have a little cheat sheet that you could download. So I'll link out to that as well in the show notes. But if you don't have that much time and you really need to figure out what the problem is, you could use Mojo Packets as a way to visualize that for you. And so what you can do is sign up for an account. It's free. I think they just limit you of how large the PCAT file is going to be. But then once you upload that, you'll be able to see pretty easily what the problem might be. And so it's really easy. You just drag the file to the upload section, or you could select the file through the upload tool, and right away you can analyze different parts of this Wi-Fi capture. So you could look at performance. You could actually see packets from the AP and what that data rate looks like. And so I'm looking at a file from some random capture that I took, and I'm seeing data rates of between 20 and 40 megabits per second. You could actually also see uh, the data rate from client to the AP, and that's a little bit higher data rate, so that's good, getting about 70 sometimes. And the Mojo Packets site will break down the client performance health classification. And so it's giving me that two clients were healthy and two clients were not healthy. And by health, they're looking at clients with RSSI less than 70 dBm or speeds less than 20 megabits per second. And then you could also see some of the frame types, airtime distribution. And I'm seeing about 71% of those frames were management, and 23% were data frames. And then also total retransmissions across all clients. And that there's a breakdown for that. Your management frame distribution, how much were beacon frames versus probes, versus associations and authentications, even breakdown of control frames, how many were like block X or RTS and CTS as an example. So it really breaks this down visually and helps point out what the issues might be. You can go look at connectivity, where it lists also clients and their connection end reason, any disconnects, a full list of all clients that were captured in this frame, and also the access points along with their BSSID, and also the name of the SSID in that area. So this one, I'm actually looking at the hotel that I was troubleshooting because I can see the hotel's SSID. But when you really look at performance, you could see maybe why there have been issues in the area. I mean, 71% management frames within this small window of frame capture. That could be a lot, right? If there's not a lot of clients connecting to your Wi-Fi network. So this is what I use as a kind of the basis of capturing wireless frames with a Mac, and you could use this in any way that you see as fit, right? You could use that to learn how Wi-Fi works. It's a great way to really understand 802.11 and how that works with different clients and different APs. You could learn about the state machine, how clients authenticate and associate, and how they go through security. You can learn about the handshakes. This is perfect for studying for CWMP exams, but where it's most beneficial in the real world is for troubleshooting. And the troubleshooting piece, this is really critical because you could have a big issue that it's been tough to crack, right? And then if you do a frame capture, you're able to see that happening. And one of the examples where I've used my own Mac for frame captures was in an office setting where people in a meeting space kept getting disconnected off of Wi-Fi. They were doing these Skype calls, and they're doing Skype calls over Wi-Fi, so their video was involved, but they were having a very poor experience. And so when I got there, I didn't find anything terrible. I was able to join Wi-Fi myself, but from what they were telling me, I couldn't find the issue right off the bat. The access point was there in the room. Infrastructure looked good. There was no congestion. I was the only one there in the room. But when I did a frame capture, I noticed one thing, which was a single device that kept wanting to transmit data, but was using really long duration times. And because it was using really long duration times, that means any other device that was in the area and heard that frame, they would be quiet for that period of time. But this device would constantly set a long duration time. So it looked very abnormal. It didn't seem right. So I located this device and it turned out to be a an Apple TV, and it just wasn't functioning correctly. When they replaced that Apple TV, most of their problems went away. They were having Skype calls, no problem, and I wouldn't have seen that through just normal troubleshooting through the controller as an example, or seeing it on the AP. But it was really interesting to see the amount of frames being transmitted through one single device and how it was affecting everyone else in the surrounding area using that channel. So the, there's a lot of value to using wireless frame captures, and I highly recommend you guys using, if you have a MacBook, go ahead and try doing this and do it wherever you go, and look at what frames appear in different environments, and look to see if you can maybe identify some issues, or the next time you're having your own wireless issue, maybe try to figure it out with frame capture. That's the easiest way. So that's the whole episode there on capturing wireless frames with a Mac. Again, pretty simple, and I'll list out some more instructions on the show notes. That's cleartosend.net/121, where you'll find links to all the resources that I use, the applications, and how to install it if this is your first time getting into this. And from there, you'll be able to really troubleshoot further and take your Wi-Fi experience to the next level. So that's all that I have for today. The last week I was over at Wi-Fi Now, heard a lot of great and interesting things out of that conference. It is a very different conference from what I'm used to when it comes to technical content as in Wi-Fi. I mean, there were some technical presentations, but not very technical. They weren't deep dives. There was a lot of talk with home Wi-Fi networking, kind of looking out into the future as well, the future of Wi-Fi and the spectrum that we need. A lot of talk about how 802.11ax will probably solve all our Wi-Fi issues and save 2.4. So a lot of forward thinking, very positive in that aspect. But if you don't know me, I kind of take that with a grain of salt until I actually see it in motion. But I will remain positive about where we're going with Wi-Fi and the protocols that are coming out. So look to some new episodes in the near future as we tackle things like home Wi-Fi mesh networking. We're going to talk about 802.11ax, also 11ad, and seeing where the future is going with Wi-Fi. What do we need to look at as Wi-Fi engineers, as network engineers? What can we do to make experience better for a lot of our end users? So there you have it. This is episode number 121. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We are at clear2send on Twitter. Feel free to shoot us an email, info@cleartosend.net, and you can always find us on our website. So let us know what you guys think about the website. Is it a good change for those of you who have seen the previous website? And if this is your first time heading over to the website to check out the show notes, let me know what you think about your experience going through there. Anyhow, I want to thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to review us on iTunes and share this episode if you found it useful. Share it with your friends and colleagues. So once again, I will see you on the next episode. Thanks, guys.